Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, your daily destination for clear, concise and exam-focused current affairs for UPSC. It's July 24, 2026 and today we have two important articles for your mains 2026 preparation. First, we will examine whether fast-track courts can truly deliver faster justice, exploring the challenges of judicial reforms and pendency in India. Next, we will discuss the government's decision to allow FDI in the inventory-based e-commerce model for exports and understand what it means for manufacturing, MSMEs, exports and India's digital economy. We will also bring you mains value addition materials from today's current affairs, important data, reports, example, committee recommendations and case studies that can help you write better and sharper answers. And finally, we will conclude the discussion with prelims pointers for your upcoming 2027 Civil Services examination. So, let's begin. Hello guys, welcome back to Analyst. I hope all of you are doing well and I hope that all of you are also following the recent protests which are going on and being carried on by the students, because we have seen various paper leak cases throughout the country. This is why we have seen the government of India also has been announcing various recent measures, because as of yesterday, the Prime Minister has promised that the country would set up fast-track courts to try to give faster justice to the students. But the main topic of discussion here today is that can fast-track courts really deliver faster justice in the country? So in the broader context of GS2, that is Indian Constitution and judiciary, let us firstly understand from absolute basic about what do you mean by fast-track courts. So to understand this, imagine that there is a hospital and you know that at various hospitals we have two sections. One is the normal ward section, one is the emergency section. So generally, patients who would require emergency needs such as heart attack victims or victims who have suffered physically such as fractures, they would require immediate care. So in this exact spirit, just like hospitals who have the same doctors, same nurses, same medicines, the fast track courts also will be having the same law, same evidence, same judge, but the scheduling will be prior. The scheduling will be done at an emergency level. Now, let us come to the main debate, whether the government can create a fast track court for any single case, because there are so many cases which are ongoing in the country, due to which we also have the issue of pendency of cases. So firstly, we have pending cases, then we also have fast track courts. So where is the perfect balance here? To understand this, understand firstly the implication of Article 14 and the equality provisions, because we understand that equality is guaranteed to every Indian citizen, and in justice we should also get the same kind of equality. And this is where we have to understand that there are various kinds of, say, legal issues. There are normal legal issues also, and there are some legal issues which demand special attention. This is exactly which collided in a 1952 Supreme Court case. This is the Anwar Wali case, where this challenged the West Bengal Special Courts Act 1950, which gave powers to the state government to set a fast-track court for any special reason. So the petitioner challenged that if the government or the state government is setting a fast-track court for any random reason, so definitely the pendency cases will be increasing again. So definitely the main purpose of the fast-track court is actually to deliver swift justice, will not be delivered mainly to the various demands and mainly also to the vulnerable sections of the population also, right? So this is exactly why the Supreme Court came up with an intelligible differentia test. Here, Supreme Court laid down some objective factors. To understand this, imagine the scenario of a rape victim. So you understand that this is a very serious offense, right? So definitely the nature of the offense should be very serious if you are talking about giving that particular case to a fast-track court, so that the court would actually try to deliver a swift judgment. Also, consider that the same rape victim is coming from a very poor family, from a poor background. So that person is vulnerable, right? So based on that also, some vulnerable victims sometimes have seen some court cases dragged for years. So to address also that, vulnerability of the victim should be considered if we are setting up the fast-track courts. Also, in the public interest, sometimes say the cases of terrorism, Now this is where we actually involve national security also. So sometimes national security can also make the cases very emergency in nature. So, and at the end of the day, we also have various other aspects such as legislative objective. So sometimes we can actually understand that there can be various offenses such as rape and POXO Act victims, right? Also various property disputes which have been pending for more than 5 years. Plus, there have been some cases related to some vulnerable sections of the population, right? So there are some aspects, for example, the 14th Finance Commission recommendation, the 2019 centrally sponsored schemes, which actually recommend that, okay, there are some categories of litigants which require faster justice, right? So for them, definitely, the legislature is there. For example, the parliament is there and the state legislative assemblies are there, that they can set up some fast track courts to give the victim speedy justice, right? Apart from that, the 2023 BNSS also is trying to speed up the process of trials, because it is mandating that all the trials should be completing within 2 years and 2 months, especially for sexual offenses, right? And in this entire case, we have seen that these are actually the steps and actions taken by the legislature and executive. This is also supported by a 2002 Supreme Court judgment. So in this judgment, the courts have told that the courts do not have too much of powers to delineate fast track courts. Why? Because there is something that is known as judicial legislation that judiciary should not do, because we have separation of power. We know that the main purpose of legislation is actually given to parliament or the state legislative assemblies. So it is better that the legislation should be left to them. Similar is the case of fast track courts. Now we have seen that over a particular period of time, we have seen that there are more than 800 fast track courts which are actually regular and functioning, right? There are also various courts at the POXO level. And also we have seen at the fast track courts, the disposal rate is around 96%, right? And you know, this is actually 3 times more than a regular court's average disposal per month. So this means that fast track courts can really deliver swift justice. But we have also seen recently that the courts should not be getting into the domain of the legislature. But we have seen that there are some cases in the past which actually have been very serious at a public level. For example, the Satyam scam, the 2G spectrum scam, the crime against women, for example, the Nirbhaya case, and also in various cases the POXO cases. So in some cases which are actually of great national importance, sometimes the judiciary have also stepped in. But we will not be getting into that matter of separation of power and judicial legislation too much, because the main topic of today is fast track court. So firstly, understand that if we rename every single court as fast track court, will justice automatically become faster? Because here we have to right now zoom out from the fast track court into the overall court system and the judicial system in the country. Now firstly, understand one important issue, that there is a fast track court in Delhi which is related to POXO trials, and the trials are taking 9 years instead of 1. Why? Because there are actually various connected issues. The very first issue is that in India we have only 21 judge per million population, wherein our own law commission have recommended 50 per million. US has 150 per million, and even the same is seen in the case of UK. Why we are seeing this case? Because there are so many vacancies in the judicial cases. Also, adjournments take very often. We have seen this case na, Tariq pe Tariq pe Tariq, where the courts only give Tariq, insaf is 0. Right? Even recently the Supreme Court has actually condemned the adjournment culture, that this Tariq pe Tariq culture should be done away with, because this simply leads to more pending cases and more delay. So when we zoomed out from the fast track courts to the overall judicial issues, we see that overall judiciary itself has actually a lot of pending cases. If you see the pending cases at the Supreme Court level, it is at around 61,000 cases which are pending at the Supreme Court level. Take into consideration the high courts, around 40 lakh cases. Forget about the lower judiciary courts, because simply the cases are unimaginable there. Even when we look into the recent data, the latest data of 2026, according to the data by the National Judiciary Grid, at the Supreme Court level, now the cases have increased from 61,000 to 96,000 almost, right? And sometimes the oldest case is also pending since 1986. This means that there are so many cases which are pending for more than 10, 20, even 30 years from now, where we have to appreciate the fact that democracy rests on three important values such as law, courts and public trust. But if we see that there are so many cases which are pending and justice is not meaningful because it is arriving too late, then it can lead to the erosion of the public trust. If you simply look into the Indian states with the most pending cases, it is UP, Maharashtra and so on. If you see, the judges per million is abysmally low there. Right? Now, we have to also understand that the fast track court can only address one part of this chain, because apart from the pending cases, we have various other issues also. Because whatever the investigations are taking place at the judicial level, at the police level, right, the charge sheet is actually at a very slower pace and it is leading to weaker prosecution at the courts. Also, the police and various state agencies have weak forensic capabilities to actually investigate properly. Next, to understand why the evidence and the forensic capability is very weak, because the cooperation of the stakeholders sometimes cannot be seen properly. Because in some serious cases we have seen that the bar associations go on strike, and this is where the lawyers sometimes cannot actually argue properly in the courts because they are simply on strike. Also, witnesses turn hostile because sometimes the witnesses are offered money and funds, and at the end of the day, adjournment culture is there. The judges themselves, they adjourn the cases, and this actually leads to the delay. Also, when we talk about the overall architecture, I mean the infrastructure of the courts in the country, we have seen that only 26% of the court complexes do not have separate ladies' toilet, 16% do not have toilet for gents, 5% have medical facilities, 32% have only separate rooms, right? Only 51% have a library, right? 27% have a computer on judges' dais with video for conferencing facility. The rest of the judges do not have. So these are all serious issues, guys. Lastly, we have also seen that recently in the budget, judiciary only got 0.08% of the budget. So we have to realize right now that fast track court is actually only one part of the chain, because mainly when we talk about the fast track court, these are actually set up alongside the district courts also. Now look at the district courts backlog. Look at the reasons behind the backlog. Sometimes the counsel is not available. Accused has been missing. Witnesses are missing. There are so many missing documents and various other cases. Simply if you see the various cases which are actually pre-litigation before even reaching court, these are actually 22.2 crores. That means there are so many cases which did not even reach courts, and maybe they will be reaching in the next few years. Apart from this, we see that there are 30 to 35% vacancy of the judges. 75% of India's prison population are actually under trials. Right? They did not even get a proper investigation, and they did not even maybe have gotten a proper hearing, right? And at the end of the day, after CAG audit, it has been found that the funds has been fully utilized under the Nirbhaya fund. The Nirbhaya fund actually gave funds to set up more fast track courts to try the cases regarding the rape cases and the minor rape cases and various other sexual offences cases. So that fund is not being utilized. Fast track courts also have not been set up properly. So in this case, what we have to do? Simply, we have to move away from just subjective factors. For example, the student protests which have been going on right now, this has prompted the government to set up the fast track courts right now. So this is one of the objective factor that the government has to carry on in the future. So fast track courts should not be set up for random reasons. Right? So this is a genuine reason, but there have been various other cases where the fast track courts have been set up for random reasons too. So that has to be stopped. Fast track courts must have a proper statute, a law in the country. There must be an objective criteria, because the Article 14 guarantees equality. Right? So here, maybe we have to ensure that the rich who can afford proper lawyers and everything, they do not take indirect benefits of the fast track courts. because sometimes some fast track courts can be set up for random political reasons too. Next, we have to go to our president's recommendation of setting up the All India Judicial Service. So this will be, a kind of a centralized services if ever we try to set up it, just like the IAS, IPS officers who have a centralized cadre, and at the end of the day they serve as various districts, right? So the judges also will be recruited and they will be posted at various districts, so that over a period of time we can actually get rid of the issue of shortage of judges, because we have to move closer to the law commission recommendations of having 50 judges per million and fill vacancies as soon as possible to reduce the systemic backlog that we see. So in this, we also have to take various other technological initiatives and other alternate initiatives, such as the e-courts phase 3, wherein we have to integrate integrated IT technologies, computers, video conferencing, AI assisted case management. We also have to talk about electronic ADR, alternate dispute resolution, such as mediation, conciliation, reconciliation. So all of these things should be set up, and also we can have some distinct time slots for the past pending cases too. And at the end of the day, there are other suggestions. For example, the 15th Finance Commission proposed various grants for judiciary. Now these grants can be used to improve the infrastructure to set up more fast track courts, wherein this can also be set up using a PPP model, where the private sector can also help in the same. We have to increase the forensic lab and the research facility so that the investigations and the evidence are actually done in a proper way. And at the end of the day, we have to also heed to the Malimat committee recommendation, which actually told about increasing the funding of judiciary as a whole. Recently, the same also has been demanded by our Chief Justice of India, which demanded around 50,000 crore to actually increase the judicial infrastructure and the facilities there. So this was all for this article. There are more good examples of some fast track courts setting some positive scenarios in the country. You can also scan this QR code to know what else the government of India is also doing in a separate case to reduce the overall judicial pendencies, not only for the fast track courts. And finally, you can practice this mains answer. So right now we will move on to the next topic, where we will mainly have a look into why recently the government of India allowed foreign direct investment in our inventory model for e-commerce exports. So from the perspective of GS3, where we have the topics of e-commerce and digital economy, let us understand why this is known as India's Retail Policy 2.0. Now, the main story starts with you in your day-to-day lives. Now, from childhood only, we have seen that there are mainly 3 markets that we go to. Firstly, we have the local Kirana store, where we have very good relations with the shopkeeper also. Or we go to Big Bazaar, or right now we have the D-Mart, we have Reliance Mart, we have so many other supermarts locally surrounded in our country, right? And at the end of the day, we also have the online commerce, such as Flipkart, Amazon, and all of those things. Now, you will be very surprised to know one simple fact is that the Kirana stores have 91% market share, followed by the big box retail and 3% of online commerce. Now, this is the 2025 data, which actually tells that the retail Kirana stores are actually valued at 51 lakh crore. So just understand the insane amount of business that these people generate. Also, the local shopkeeper that you are actually very good friends with. You also have seen there is a helper boy there also. So you know that these Kirana stores actually give a lot of employment opportunities too. So this means that these Kirana stores are very important for the local employment too. Now, there is something which is going on throughout the world that is known as the Walmart effect. Now you know that Walmart is a very big, large multinational company, where they have this big retail box stores. I mean, just like the Big Bazaar that you have seen before, and right now the V-Mart, D-Mart, Vishal stores that you see. So Walmart actually operates on that model, where you have actually so many, say, products of different companies on one particular supermart. Now, you know what Walmart is doing throughout the world? It is actually setting up various shops and various, say, its own subsidiaries in various countries, and it is driving out the local business done by the kirana stores, the local shops. This is actually what we know as the Walmart effect. And since the 1991 liberalization, privatization and globalization, India has always tried to attract foreign direct investment, where the foreign investors actually bring in a lot of dollars, which actually are being invested in the country also. Imagine the cases of business processing outsourcing, right? Or the various IT infrastructure companies in the country, where a lot of FDI has come into this sector, and we actually have benefited a lot. But on the other hand, we know that the government of India actually follows a mixed economy model, not a capitalist model. Now, Walmart effect is actually seen in purely capitalistic, say, countries, where, once a Walmart shop is set up, the rest of the kirana stores actually run away with, because we know that mainly the online commerce and the various big box retail that we have, they generally offer big discounts, and these big discounts are actually not competitive for the local kirana shops. So definitely that is why we have not yet allowed various big companies such as Walmart to come directly in India and set up companies and shops. So in this broader context, let us firstly understand, what do you mean by FDI in retail from basics? So there are two types of retail shops. Firstly, you see Adidas, Apple. These are all shops that you can see in India also. These are known as single brand retail. So all the products that you see in these shops now, these are of these own companies only. So in this, we have allowed 100% FDI. So whichever foreign investor would like to come in India and set up their own single brand retail, they are free to do so. They can come in India and they can set it up. But in cases of such supermarts, which are known as multi-brand retail, because if you see, for detergents, for example, we have Surf Excel, we have Henko, we have Tide in the same store, right? What happens in the single brand retail, we have only products of the same company, but in multi-brand retail, we have products of different companies. So this is where we did not allow FDI, because simply this is the model which Walmart and various other companies run on, and they offer deep discounts. They offer various prices which are actually lower than the market price sometimes, which can drive out the kirana stores out of competition. This will be leading to huge amount of unemployment in the country, because we know that most of the employment in the country is informal in nature, where more than 90% of the population are actually in the informal sector. So just imagine this 51 lakh crore worth of business being wiped out, right? And what will happen to the local helper boys who are working at the kirana stores? They will be losing their jobs, and it will be leading to more of the market power being concentrated in, say, Walmart or on various, say, other foreign brands also, right? And this will be where the global corporations and the global companies will be dominating in the Indian markets. Now let us actually understand why this Walmart model is even much more dangerous. Why government actually has not yet allowed the FDI in the multi-brand retail. So here we have two important terms: the inventory approach to the e-commerce market and the marketplace model. Now we all know about the marketplace model. Here we have various sellers. For example, there can be a bookseller in Delhi who is actually listed on Amazon or Flipkart, right? And based on whatever you want to buy as a customer, you will go on to Amazon and Flipkart, and you will be looking onto the books, and you will be buying directly from Amazon and indirectly from the seller, right? So this is what we mean by marketplace model. Here we have so many products of various goods and services, right? Now look at the other model, that is the inventory model. For example, consider Nykaa. Nykaa has their own products, right? For example, Nykaa is a particular private company who has their own stock. They set their own prices, they set their own discounts. Nykaa can have their own warehouses, and Nykaa via their website can ship directly to the customers, right? So this is what we mean by inventory model. So in this company, whatever the Nykaa products will be listed on their websites, it will be the Nykaa company's own discretion. And for example, if tomorrow Nike company would want to sell some other fashion brand. So it is up to their own discretion to list the other brands on their company websites or not under the inventory model, right? Now this is not the same as the marketplace model. Marketplace model actually lists multiple sellers of multiple products, where Amazon and Flipkart can only list the products, and based on some commission they earn their own revenues. So in India, foreign e-commerce companies are allowed to operate under the marketplace model, not under the inventory model. Because imagine one scenario: if there is a foreign company who is allowed to operate this inventory model, right? They will not actually let any other Indian companies or their products being listed onto the model itself, right? So this means that to reduce the possibility of predatory pricing, or that practice where you drive the prices below the market price just to outsmart the competition around you, we did not allow FDI in the inventory model yet, right? So what the various other big corporations like Walmart did? Walmart found a different route. Walmart did what? Walmart actually in 2018 bought a stake in the marketplace model of Flipkart. Apart from same, Walmart also has some stakes in the PhonePe too, which is also getting ready for its new IPO. Now, since we have actually understood the entire debate regarding the FDI in marketplace and the inventory model, now let us actually talk about what happened. The Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade on Thursday actually permitted the foreign direct investment in the inventory-based model of e-commerce. Now we did this because we were witnessing that the Chinese e-commerce market is around at $3 billion when we talk about the exports from the Chinese e-commerce markets. But when we talk about India, it is only at $5 billion. So for the first time, foreign e-commerce companies are right now allowed to participate under the inventory-based model only for exports, not for the retail business in the country, in domestic country. So here we shall understand why we actually need this model at all. Why suddenly the government of India needs FDI in retail when we talk about the inventory model to promote exports. Now imagine that you have a handicrafts factory. Now your handicraft factory is not very big, right? So, but you see that there are lots of demands of your products of handicrafts in Canada, in Europe, in various other parts of the world. So to export your handicraft, you firstly need to apply for business. You have to get an export code. You have to understand the various documents which are very technical in nature, right? Also, additionally, you have seen that US has been targeting India because US accuses that India uses a lot of forced labor, child labor in such local companies, local handicrafts companies, local MSMEs, right? So actually you understand the MSMEs have a huge compliance burden. They have to furnish a lot of documents for exports, customs, packaging, quality, testing, etc. Now this is sometimes not possible for the small MSMEs to do, right? So this is exactly what the government wants right now. Government wants that the MSME should not be worried about all of these detailed processes. MSMEs should firstly try to focus on the manufacturing of the product, because this is where they are actually good at. Now the other aspects such as technology, documentation, logistics, AI demand forecasting, various other aspects, packaging, everything can be now left to Amazon or Flipkart. And this is where Amazon and Flipkart will be handling all those kind of compliances. And finally, exports can happen. And this is where you understand that MSMEs are actually so important that they contribute to 30%, almost 31.1% to our GDP. And most importantly, they have around almost 50% share in our exports. So you understand that if we right now allow FDI in the inventory model, so definitely there will be so many foreign investors who will be coming up with money, new technology, maybe with even artificial intelligence, with good logistics, improving the inventory model so that the compliance can be taken care of by the marketplace model of, say, Amazon and Flipkart and various other websites also, and we can use this for our exports. So here we also have to come up with one more extra concept, that is increasing the traceability of Indian products. For example, say you are based in US and you want to buy Indian organic honey. So you are an aware consumer, right? You want to know where the honey is coming from, where the raw material of the honey is coming from, how the manufacturing process is done, if it is organic at all or not, because there are so many fake products also online. So that is why, the European Union has come up with an idea that is known as digital product passport. So this passport will be guaranteeing that everything is mentioned properly on the label of the product, or say on the manufacturer's website, or even in the listing of Amazon or Flipkart. Say the origin, raw material, manufacturing process, sustainability information, life cycle information, warranty, and everything will be mentioned. But whatever we have decided as of now, this is very good to promote our exports. But at the end of the day, there are some concerns too. For example, firstly, there is a major think tank which is known as the GTRI. It is actually cautioning that whether this particular initiative by the DPIIT to allow this inventory model for exports only, this tomorrow can also creep into retail too. Maybe tomorrow the government of India can change its mind that okay, right now we can also do the same with the Kirana stores. And if that happens, we will see a Walmartization of Indian markets. So firstly, the way forward is to prevent that. We should not let this retail business to be impacted as of now. Maybe firstly, we have to give them some supports like the ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce, is actually an alternative to your Flipkart and Amazon, where in this Flipkart and Amazon model, in this marketplace model, there are lots of fees and charges which are involved, which sometimes the local Kirana shops cannot afford too much. So that is why we right now are moving to the Open Network for Digital Commerce, where there can be sellers from any side. There can be big marts, Kirana stores, there can be any seller, such as even restaurants. If you open your Paytm, you can actually see this account of ONDC, where there are even some local Kirana stores operating there. Why? Because there are less number of costs which are involved. So firstly, what we must do as a country, firstly, let us transition to this model on a digital mode, and then think about retail FDI being allowed or not. Second, there are also concerns about export versus domestic inventory separation. Some industry experts are telling that how will you separate the inventory, that this inventory is only for export, this inventory is only for domestic, in various say inventory based model. So that separation is also to be sorted out, right? Also, when we talk about the various export guidelines and regulations, in India, they are more friendly for the business to business opportunities. When we talk about the local MSMEs, there are still some regulations which are not well implemented. So here we have to come up with better regulations for the MSMEs in this particular regard. And finally, when we talk about overall export architecture, we have to sort out the delays that we see at our ports, the files, the recommendations, the various other requirements and compliances that our local MSMEs need. We have to also get away with that. For example, the various taxation, the various land requirements, all of them have to be streamlined even more for the small MSMEs for this model to be really successful. Now, we have discussed this in great detail. It is now your turn to answer these questions and move on to the mains value addition section, where the first topic is based on a crop known as kutki. So if you see in Himachal Pradesh, there are so many farmers who grow this crop, and this has various medical benefits, and it is also an endangered herb. Right now, this is actually in huge demand abroad and also within the country, which is why it is encouraging the various farmers in Himachal Pradesh to grow this crop, because it can sell up to around 1,500 rupees per kilogram. So around 180 farmers in Mandi are actually thinking of growing this crop, because this can double their income in the coming years. So this will be a very good value addition in your GS3 answers related to sustainable agriculture. And also, if you want to cite some examples which states are doing some good aspects of promoting agriculture at a very hyper local level, you can cite the example of Himalayan Research Group by promoting the kutki crop here, which actually has various medical benefits and also a huge export potential. So in this one, from the perspective of your GS1 Indian society, let us actually understand what the government of Odisha is planning to reduce human trafficking. So according to the latest NCRB data 2024, you have seen that the total cases of human trafficking as of 2024, it has around 5,839. It has reduced marginally, but when we talk about the state of Odisha, it is actually having the highest number of human trafficking victims of India for the 4 consecutive years. So this means that due to various factors such as having a huge number of rural population, say around 83%, many population actually are vulnerable. They are actually in the informal sector. They have limited means and livelihood. They are actually belonging even to the poorest of the population. So due to these reasons, the vulnerability of such victims towards human trafficking, it increases a lot. Also, a majority of the section which belongs to the scheduled tribe population is also vulnerable due to low literacy rate, low livelihood aspects. Also, when we talk about the gender literacy rate, you understand that in Odisha, only 64% of the females are literate compared to 82% of males, making them even more vulnerable to misinformation and luring and trapping by the various human traffickers. At the end of the day, we also see one of the highest Indian states with migrants. So this is exactly why the government of Odisha came up with Nutan Sakal framework, which will have various village level migration registers to track the various victims who are trafficked. Also, integrated victim support centers will be coming up at every districts. So if you are writing an answer on human trafficking, on child abuse, or on related issues, you can cite this kind of recommendations. Now, the next aspect will be setting a fast track courts and special courts. Also, giving more power under the PMLA Act to prosecute those accused involved in this human trafficking racket. And finally, there will be a specialized fund for this entire endeavor to reduce human trafficking. Now, on to the next one, where we will understand why India needs a regulatory framework for virtual digital assets. So, in your GS3 paper, based on the topic of digital economy and also blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, we have to understand why the government is actually in the need of a framework for regulating the virtual digital assets, which are nothing but your crypto assets, non-fungible tokens, which are actually also seen in art, music, games, or utility tokens, stable coins, others, which are actually the main category of virtual digital assets. If you see the recent data, crypto transactions have crossed around 51,000 crore in 2024-25, and you will also be surprised to understand that crypto transactions are increasingly being used in the dark net. Also, various investors, they actually hype up the cryptocurrencies just to increase the prices and have various market manipulation measures. So this is why we need a regulation of these currency assets and digital assets. That is why the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance has recommended an interim regulatory framework via self-regulatory organization. This means that if there is a company who is selling the virtual digital assets, that particular company should be self-regulating itself to see whether their assets are used in illegal purposes or not, or to prevent their assets being artificially inflated in price or not. So this is where we will be getting this kind of guidelines. In the future, also, clear VDA classification must be there. For example, if you see, there are various types of virtual digital assets. So this is where we should be very clear as to what type of assets must be under regulation. And at the end of the day, we need to also carry out stakeholder regulations with RBI, with the Ministry of Finance, with the various private companies operating in this domain, also with the global regulators. So in this way, we can actually give recommendations in any answers related to this topic. Now, we will be moving on to the prelims pointers. So over the past few months, we have seen that the Strait of Hormuz was blocked, right? It was blocked by Iran. And right now, due to which we have seen that the US is also very much invested in the region by striking Iran, and also US is threatening that the Strait of Hormuz will also be blockaded from US's side too. Now Iran actually has very limited options in this entire war which is going on. Already it has suffered a huge damage in the leadership aspect because their main leader is dead. Also the current leader, it is not sure whether he is alive or not. On the other hand, we have seen the military infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, everything has been damaged in Iran. So definitely Iran right now is trying to diversify the war from its own shorelines to that of Bab el-Mandeb, which is right now becoming the latest flashpoint. Why? Because recently Yemeni Houthis have attacked two Saudi Arabia flagged tankers. So perspectives here are very important to understand first. So the first perspective is, how can various geographical choke points become an economic weapon? You know, in the 21st century world, trade is perhaps the most important criteria for development of the entire country, of also the entire world as a whole. Now you understand that in the entire world, most of the trade generally takes place via ships and shipping lanes. So in this activity, what happens, you know, there are so many regions. If you see, all of these are marked in orange and the names are also given respectively. These are those narrow regions which are actually one of the most important, busiest shipping routes, where most of the energy supplies also go through, semiconductor supplies also go through, rare earth and digital infrastructure also goes through. These are known as the global shipping choke points. For example, you already know Strait of Hormuz was very important for Gulf oil exports. Once it is closed, all of the Gulf countries actually are right now staring at losses. Even India is facing various issues right now due to the Middle East war, due to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz very frequently. Now, Bab el-Mandeb is very important for the Red Sea Suez route. Next comes the Suez Canal, Strait of Malacca. All of these things, if you see, are very important for the global trade to happen properly. Now, for your mapping aspects, it is very important that you understand which canals, which straits are located in which countries and surrounding countries too. Now, when we talk about the main event right now, on 20th July, the Yemeni Houthis attacked this Saudi Arabia flagged vessel. Now, this is not an isolated event. From 1973 only, during the Arab-Israeli war, the Yemenis have supported the Egypt during the Yom Kippur war and hence applied a naval blockade, during which we see after some periods of time in 2000s, the same area was also infested with Somalian pirates. In 2015, during the Yemeni war, we have seen how again this area was blockaded and missiles, drones and naval mines were also used against the enemy forces, mainly Saudi Arabia. And in 2023, during the Israel's invasion of Gaza, we have seen again Houthi forces attacked the various ships passing through this very narrow strait of land. Now, it is very important to understand the geography first and then look into the players. If you see, this is the country of Yemen in this region. Surrounding by, we have the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Located just in the middle, there is this 29-kilometer wide strait that is known as Bab el-Mandeb, which is actually a very important shipping corridor. Why? Because through this region, you know, we have on the north the Suez Canal. This links to the Mediterranean Sea, which links to the entire of the Europe. So you understand that if there is any ship which wants to pass through this region and go through the Suez Canal to the Europe, this right now won't be possible. So you understand, after the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, if this also closes, then we are staring at a long winter. Because firstly, we have to understand that if Iran is being cornered by US and Israel forces right now, using drones, missile strikes and everything, Iran would like to right now activate its friends. Friends of Iran are also Houthis in Yemen. So definitely Iran also indirectly sends a lot of funding, money and everything to the Houthis, due to which Iran actually carries on this regional proxy war. So right now, when this conflict is going on in Iran, Bab el-Mandeb is becoming very, very important. Right now, we know that Bab el-Mandeb in English is known as the Gate of Tears, because it is a very narrow channel of 29 kilometers almost, right, where it is very difficult to navigate due to the strong currents, also due to the presence of the pirates. Now, you also have to understand 12% of the global merchandise trade happens through this region. 5% of the global oil passes through this region. And also, this is a major traffic for the Asia to Europe container traffic. Imagine if there is some container ship which would want to go to Rotterdam in Europe. It has two options. One is turn around the Cape of Good Hope or take the Suez Canal route, right? Definitely the Suez Canal route is much more shorter. But you know what happened? During the 2023 Houthi strikes on Iran, it blockaded the ships. And those ships had to go around the Cape of Good Hope to Europe. So already the Strait of Hormuz is a kind of a choke point which is being blocked right now due to this conflict. Right now, if Bab el-Mandeb is also blocked, just imagine what would be the scenario. Now, due to the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, since Saudi Arabia could not transport the oil through this region, it actually was using the east-west crude oil pipeline and was transporting using this route. Now again, if this route is being blocked by the Houthis, how will Saudi Arabia solve the problem of the transportation? Because the backup route that was Bab el-Mandeb is right now under threat. So this is where we have to understand these very important regions of Yanzu, from where actually Saudi Arabia used to transport the remaining petroleum due to the crude oil crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, that is also right now in block. So this means that again we may be looking at a supply crisis and a shock for the entire world and even for us, because India is actually dependent on various engineering goods, pharmaceutical, textiles, chemicals, automobiles, containers and fertilizers on this entire route of Bab el-Mandeb. So if this is again blockaded, situations can also flare up. Insurance costs can also rise, because due to war, various companies charge more for shipping insurance, and the overall impact on the entire economy, on the global economy, on the Indian economy will be much, much worse. So this was all for this one. We will be seeing what will be the updates which will be taking place. But before that, we have to right now move on to the next article. So in both the Hindu and the Indian Express today, there is this article which reports that the Delhi police detention power under the National Security Act has been extended. So let us understand this from the perspective of fundamental rights and GS2. So this is in the news. Why? Because you know, as of 15th July, the Home Police Department of the Government of Delhi, it released this kind of notification that the police commissioner can exercise powers under the National Security Act from 19th of July to 18th of October. Now, the Delhi police, through its Twitter, it is telling that this is a kind of a routine administrative renewals. But there are so many sections of the population which are actually complaining that since the protests are ongoing right now in the country, that is why to detain various violent protesters, this power is right now extended to the Delhi Police Commissioner. Now, firstly, let us start from absolute basics. Why do criminal law exist in the first place? Say, for example, there is a crime which has taken place. Obviously, there must be an investigation. After that, there must be a trial. After that, you know, if the judge at the court, the judge finds the person guilty, he can sentence the person and convict it, or you can actually acquit the individual, right? This is how criminal trial goes on. Now, imagine that for some reasons, this protest is going on in the country regarding the demand of the paper leak and the investigation that should follow after it. Now, in this protest, imagine that there are some anti-national elements. these anti-national elements, they are doing what? They are entering the protest, they are talking to the protesters in an indirect way, and they are trying to incite violence. Now, in India, we have various intelligence agencies. We have, for example, IBs. Now, for example, imagine a scenario where IB officials have found that there are these X, Y, Z individuals who are going to the crowd and inciting the crowd. Right? Now, the IBs have reported that to the police department. What should the police department do right now? The police department, for example, if the case is really genuine, has the power of preventive detention. Preventive detention means that we need not follow the usual criminal trial that we follow. That arrest should be made after investigation and all of those things, right? Here, a person can be detained if that person is posing an immediate risk to the society, national security, and various other aspects. So a person can be arrested before a crime is taking place. This is the main idea of preventive detention. And this is why this National Security Act is in the news. Because many quarters of the sections of the population is complaining that this power has been extended to the police commissioner of Delhi just to give this preventive detention power so that the Delhi police can maybe detain some individuals who are on the suspicion of inciting violence. Now, all these allegations are not important for the exam. What is important for the exam is the various procedural aspects of the National Security Act. Now, National Security Act was brought in by an ordinance in 1980 by the then Indira Gandhi government, because we maybe need some genuine preventive detention in some genuine situations which are serious in nature, which can actually go against the country in cases of some terrorism incidents, right? So, according to some experts, this is very draconian or controversial in nature. Why? Because without immediate criminal prosecution, anyone can be detained, right, or convicted based on the government satisfaction. So this is where let us understand how the government can actually go on to detain someone. So if the government, say under section 3 subclause 2 under the NSA Act, finds anyone or anyone's activity against our national security, defense of country, foreign relations, public order, or disrupting essential supplies and services such as, say, internet, electricity, or anyone who is trying to harm the agricultural supply chain in the country, those persons can be detained by some detaining authority, that can be police also, who can actually release a detaining order. Now, after the detention has been done, the particular person can be kept for 3 weeks maximum in preventive custody, and after that or within that only, the case must be presented to the advisory committee, which should be consisting of persons qualified to be a High Court judge, which has to investigate and look into all the matters within 7 weeks and actually pass the judgment as to where, if the person would really need preventive detention in the future or not. If there is more evidence that person will be actually detained, if there is more cause, it can be continued or extended, or the detention can be revoked for that person. But if the detention is being continued, it can be continued only up to 3 months at a time, which can be renewed up to maximum of 12 months at a time. But if there are some new facts, there can be a new detention case again. So you can understand that why this is a draconian law, because the detention can be extended for indefinite amount of time. Also, you need to know for your prelims who can issue the detention order. Basically, the state government is actually allowed to do the same. But under the act, the district magistrate or the commissioner of police can also do the same. And finally, under section 2E, you have to understand why the Delhi LG got involved. Because Delhi is not fully a state. It has its elective assembly. But that the subjects of law and order is actually with the LG. And that is why the LG empowered the police commissioner of Delhi to do the case. And here, we have to also answer one question. Was this extraordinary measure that happened for the first time? No. It was also taken place before. For example, in 2020, if you see in the notification here, this is the 2020 notification, where due to the CAA, NRC and the NPR protest which was going on back in 2020, this power was also extended to the then Police Commissioner of Delhi. Now, before that also in 2015, for a 3-month period, this was given to the Chief Commissioner of Delhi as special power of detention. Now, there are so many criticisms. For example, if someone is being detained in this particular way without facts or evidence, right, it is against that particular person's personal liberty, right? Also, immediate criminal prosecution does not take place. The particular person has to wait for 3 weeks, and then also for the issuing authority and finally the various other authorities to be involved, it can take indefinite amount of time. Also, for political reasons, it can be misused. And finally, the public order term, the word is actually very broad. So anything can be public order. But on the other hand, the government justification is national security. Government thinks that this power should be kept because there are terrorist threats which are going on. There can be riots which can take place, which can lead to larger case of violence. And finally, there can be some cases of, various mafias, various illegal authorities controlling and restricting the essential supplies like medicines, agricultural products, and various other aspects. So this was all for this topic. Now we will move on to the next one, where from the perspective of Indian society and urban infrastructure, let us examine how cities can reclaim the footpaths of our country. If you look into a normal traditional Indian footpath, you will see that the footpaths are actually quite wide in our country, but actually full of hawkers, sometimes full of scooties, cars being parked here and there. So this means that the pedestrians have no place to walk. And it directly runs against a very important quote that a good city is one where the easiest thing is to walk. So this means that recently Supreme Court has taken up this matter. It has directly told that in this 2026 Supreme Court case that the right to walk in the city is a fundamental right under Article 19 subclause 1D, which means that our country and the citizens have the fundamental right to move freely around the country. And if we have the freedom to move freely around the country, we actually also have the freedom to move freely on our streets. But if all these installations are there, some cars are parked, some scooties are there, and so many other hawkers are there, so the main amount of freedom is not given. So that is why directions have been given to various states and the union territories to formulate policies to decongested our pavements and our pedestrians. We have to also plan our construction, maintenance and protection in such a way that the city streets are actually planned in a way that there is minimal amount of obstruction in the passage of our pedestrians. So all of you also kind of face this situation every single day. Now if one goes beyond the Supreme Court order, there is a hidden dimension to this, which is actually rooted in urban planning and how urban planning can also contribute to urban health. This means that, according to a recent report, we see that most of the adults in our country, for example, 38% of them do not meet the WHO standards of being physically fit, due to which we are suffering from a lot of non-communicable diseases such as heart diseases, diabetes, and various other aspects of, lifestyle-based diseases. Because the physical activity has gone way down, we find that in India, we do not even do moderate physical activities. And one of the reason is because of very low quality of walkability of our Indian cities, right? Because we do not have continuous footpaths, safe crossings, adequate ways, ramps, even lighting at night, and various other issues. We understand that many of the Indians do not prefer walking right now. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that there are other reasons of procrastination also. But this is definitely one of the reasons that we do not prefer walking on the Indian streets, because simply sometimes it is too dangerous, it is too congested, and simply you do not actually get the mood also to walk, because there is something that we know as a walkability index. Based on this, you see, cities like Vienna, Lisbon, New York City, they actually rank to the top when we talk about how beautiful the cities are and how well planned the cities are for walking and cycling and doing various other outdoor activities, because there is a very well established medical belief that footpaths and walking on them can prevent a lot of your lifestyle diseases. On the other hand, you also see that in the recent times, there are simply so many road accidents taking place. For example, there are around 4.8 to 5 lakh accidents per year, which is leading to around 1.5 to 1.88 lakh deaths per year, right? And also leading to around 3% loss to India's GDP. So this is why right now it is recommended that India should be having a national active mobility mission, wherein our streets should be designated in various zones. For example, there can be pedestrian zones where only pedestrians should be walking there. There can be a separate zone just attached with the buildings for seating purposes. There can be a separate zones given for the vendors and the hawkers, and the separate zone for the cyclists. And finally, we have the roads. So this is actually a comprehensive measure when we talk about the main role of the ward level municipal authorities. So they must be coming up with this plan, and also there must be annual audits to make the cities much more walkable. Now, it is not only the government's role that they have to play. As citizens, we also have a role to play to become much more active. We can demand these things in our local elections, and at the end of the day, we also can transform our cities into livable and walkable cities by doing various outdoor activities, by planning various events and so on. On the other hand, the cities should also focus on functional infrastructure, which means that these infrastructure like hospitals, toilets, various other aspects such as benches must be there mainly for the vulnerable sections of the population, such as elderly, children, disabled sections, and so on. So this will make our urban areas a much more holistic area. And right now, we will now move on to the last article. Now, the US government has a very important initiative for Saudi Arabia and the broader West Asian region, which is the 123 nuclear agreement. So firstly, understand what is actually in news. So US and Saudi Arabia has signed a controversial deal. In this deal, the US will help Saudi Arabia to get hands-on nuclear cooperation agreement. So this will give, US 30-year civil agreement of nuclear energy with Saudi Arabia. Also, it can help Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium. We will come to this later. And finally, most importantly, it will allow US companies to help develop the program in Saudi Arabia. So this will be very, very important for the overall Middle East security of the entire region. Because we know, just in the region, we have Israel and Iran. Israel is already a nuclear power. Iran actually aspires to be a nuclear power, and this aspiration is actually the main reason behind this war which is going on, because US and Israel never wanted Iran to have nuclear weapon. So maybe this is the reason why, with some discounts, the US is helping Saudi Arabia to start its nuclear program. Now, what are the discounts? It means that International Atomic Energy Agency can be exempted from inspections of the nuclear power plants, or say the various other nuclear facilities that can come up in Saudi Arabia. So this means that here the US is maybe giving a direct benefit to Saudi just to counter Iran in the region. Now, why Saudi Arabia would want nuclear power? Why not, you can ask? Every country would want to become a nuclear power. Firstly, for energy diversification. Secondly, it sees that the Strait of Hormuz is being restricted. Oil revenues are going down. Definitely, they need nuclear energy. Also, they want to become a regional power as a perspective of their Vision 2030, during which they want to develop Saudi Arabia by leaps and bounds. On the other hand, the US wants didn't deal because it wants a long-term alliance with Saudi Arabia. Also, the various US companies such as Westington, they would love to supply the nuclear fuel, the raw materials, the nuclear reactor, right? Various other aspects of nuclear energy. So this is where the private sector would also earn a lot of money there. And the timing is very, very curious because this war is going on in Iran. Iran is said to have various operational nuclear power plants, such as that in Bunshah, who wants to have much more weapon grades uranium. So this means that if you see in the surrounding region, there are various nuclear power plants which are actually under construction, right? And none of them are actually in Saudi Arabia. One of it is actually in UAE, but none in Saudi Arabia. Also, the US wants to counter the Chinese and the Russian influence in the entire country of Saudi Arabia. And this is where a regional nuclear arms race can be triggered, because if the US supplies uranium plus nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia starts on enriching uranium, which is actually the use of specialized centrifuges like this, and actually feeding of uranium here in such a way that natural uranium consists of around only 0.7% of uranium-235. This is an isotope which is actually very low in number in natural uranium. To get to a weapons grade uranium, you need to enrich that natural level and remove the various other impurities. So this is where you use these huge centrifuges. So if Saudi Arabia is right now trying to enrich on its own soil, this means that apart from nuclear energy, Saudi Arabia wants nuclear weapons, and in fact, not only Saudi Arabia wants it, US also wants that Saudi Arabia should be having nuclear weapons as a countermeasure to Iran, because US wants Saudi to develop something that we know as nuclear latency. It is the overall ecosystem of having nuclear researchers, technology, expertise, skill, funding, each and everything to reach to an weapons grade uranium. Because most of the effort to enrich uranium is required in the very first step of enrichment, right? To reach around, say, more than 70% of enrichment of uranium, you need a lot of effort. That is why you need a lot of manpower, research, skill, etc. And going forward, it only takes less efforts to go to that weapons grade. And here, when we talk about the other aspects of the agreement, firstly, US has told that maybe as of now will be outside IAEA safeguards. But it has also told that only when Saudi Arabia cooperates with Israel based on the Abraham Accords, then only this deal can go through. In the comment section, you let me know who are the countries in Abraham Accords. And after that, if this particular agreement is not under IAEA safeguards, USA and Saudi Arabia will be signing a bilateral safeguards agreement to regulate the transfer technology for peaceful purposes and monitoring mechanism. Now, at the end, we need to finally know what do you mean by 123 agreement, right? It is nothing but the section number 123 of the US Atomic Energy Act of 1954, which deals with the Congress aspect of legal nuclear energy and technology regulation if US is trying to transfer the nuclear energy to some other countries. For example, when we talk about nuclear raw materials, equipments, technology, scientific cooperation, everything is governed by this US Atomic Energy Act, which is an act of the Congress. Now, in the comment section, finally, let me know what was India's 123 agreement with the US in nuclear energy. Now, with this, I conclude the discussion today, which has been a very long one, but filled with value additions for your examination. So please do attend the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.